I'm Karen and I attend Georgia Highlands College. My presentation highlights a basic overview of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, but mainly focuses on research case studies of several individuals who have been through trauma and have the classified criteria to meet the diagnosis of CPTSD. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is a psychological disorder formed in response to prolonged interpersonal trauma. Those who are diagnosed with CPTSD have ongoing traumas in their lives since childhood. Studies done on CPTSD have shown that the trauma that someone experiences that results in a diagnosis of CPTSD can have lasting effects on the amygdala, hippocampus, and the prefrontal cortex. We know that these brain structures are responsible for processing emotions, fear, and fear memories, episodic memories, as well as memory recognition. So you can see someone who has been diagnosed with CPTSD, how difficult it is for them because their brain has now been programmed to become fearful of every little thing, as well as to try to avoid the painful memories of their traumas. Let us now dive into several case studies exploring victims of CPTSD. Elsa is a 42-year-old female who was a victim of abuse from her adoptive parents for 19 years. Elsa was taken from Baptist Children's Home in Indiana at 4 months of age. She was raised as Esther Combs, but was never adopted by Joe and Evangeline Combs. In the early year of Elsa's life, Joe was loving towards her, but this all changed at the age of 6 when Joe started to molest her. Joe also forced Elsa to perform sexual acts on him. Her parents said that they did not want her because she was bad and would beat her sometimes until they drew blood. She was starved and beaten by parents Joseph and Evangeline Combs, who were also pastoring a church in Bristol, Tennessee at the time. Evangeline and Joseph Combs would beat Elsa with curling irons, wires, water hoses, hammers, paddles, bats, electric cords with knots tied in them, swing set chains, and basically anything they could get their hands on that would inflict pain on Elsa. Elsa was hospitalized in 1997 following a suicide attempt at the age of 19 after she drank a 24-ounce cup of antifreeze. A forensic exam determined she had over 410 scars on her body from the years of abuse she had endured at the hands of Joseph and Evangeline Combs. Joseph and Angeline were found guilty on 8 rape charges, 5 assault charges, 4 child abuse charges, 1 kidnapping charge, and 1 perjury charge. Detective Debbie Richmond with the Bristol Police Department started taking a personal interest in Elsa's case and was doing everything she could to bring justice for her. Elsa disclosed that what she endured she did not consciously realize was abnormal. Her suicide attempt was an attempt to escape because she just could not bear the physical pain any longer. Elsa had to figure out a new life for herself away from her abusers. She had to learn how to take care of herself, how to drive, and how to hold down a job. She still has bad days with nightmares and flashbacks, but she has also made great strides. She has received her GED and has a full-time job, as well as her daughter, who she takes great pride in caring for. She has made sure to love her and nurture her the way she wished she had when she was a little girl. She says that her daughter is her best friend. One thing Elsa is also advocating for is more awareness for children who may be in the same situation as she was. Tatiana is a 41-year-old female who endured years of sexual, emotional abuse by her father starting at the age of 6. Her father turned her into his sex slave. Anything he wanted, she had to do. Her father fed her drugs at age 6 to keep her doped up for the abuse. He started giving her alcohol and marijuana at age 6 and cocaine at age 10. Her father used sex and drugs to control her. By age 15, the abuse became a daily routine. Tatiana's father would also beat her. He would beat her with belts, extension cords, bats, anything that was available to him. He would beat the bottom of her feet and the back of her knees until they were so bruised she couldn't walk and was bedridden for days. Tatiana felt like a prisoner in her own home. Her father had alarms installed throughout the house and put sensors under the bed so she couldn't leave at night. Her father also tracked her period cycles. She was pregnant at ages 16, 24, and 21 and gave birth to 3 of his children. She also had 1 abortion. To help her cope after her children were born, she tried to be happy and pretend that they were a family. Her father was high on drugs one day and thought Tiana was trying to kill him. She convinced him to go to the ER. When at the ER, he stabbed her in the chest and she jumped out of the car and ran into the emergency room where she had to have emergency surgery. The stab wound was so deep that it was only a half centimeter from puncturing the sac of her heart. Once she woke up from surgery, she told hospital staff about her father, and her children were fathered by her father. Her father was then arrested. Tatiana was glad when her father was arrested. She said she called that her rebirth and born again day. She almost died, but now she was free from him. As for Tatiana's father, he was sentenced to over 100 years in prison for rape charges and was also sentenced on the stabbing of Tatiana as well. Tatiana wants her father to suffer miserably in prison. She said she doesn't want him to take his life like Ariel Castro did. Tatiana hopes to one day get her diploma and become a therapist to help other women who have suffered abuse. Haley Burns was a teenager who was lured away from her North Carolina home when she was 16. She was taken back to Atlanta to the home of 31-year-old named Michael, where she was held for 399 days until she had access to an unlocked tablet and was able to contact a friend who got in contact with her parents, who got in contact with the Georgia detectives who went and rescued Haley. I had an opportunity to interview Haley's mother about Haley and how she was doing since she had been rescued. Some therapies that have helped Haley since she's been back has been dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy for her self-harm, and she does talk therapy to help with her CPTSD, as well as equine therapy to help with her self-esteem and confidence. And some things that haven't worked for Haley, she does not do well with the mindfulness and things like yoga and meditation. They just don't work for her. Haley still struggles on a daily basis with triggers. Sometimes she is more vulnerable to them. Sometimes what would trigger her this week might not next week. Her triggers include dog stuff like leashes, collars, dog cages, especially the word doggo or doggy. Dog clickers as well. Not that we use them, but the noise specifically. Food stuff is also really hard for her. For 3 months, she will be vegan. Then she would be a vegetarian. Then for 6 months, she will binge eat. Then she will only eat blue food. There is always something about food, but what it is changes. She was able to eat Jell-O again this last month. The dog ones are better. We can manage to avoid most of those, but the food ones are hard, still very prevalent. And when asked about Haley's underlying mental health conditions, her mother confided that she has oppositional defiant disorder, PPD, which is what you get before you can get an autism diagnosis, because it usually takes 2 to 4 years to get an autism diagnosis. She also has ADHS, borderline personality disorder, bipolar 1, and schizoaffective unspecified until age 13. Then once 13, she was able to get the diagnosis of bipolar. Haley's plans for the future are she would like to get her GED and her license and eventually maybe write a book. Haley, since being home, a lot of how she's recovering, she's the same, but in some ways she'll never be the same because of the abuse that she endured. She hasn't self-harmed in the last 10 months, but she never used to do that before she went away with Michael. And she also doesn't sleep ever due to the trauma that she experienced. This concludes my presentation on complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I hope this has been beneficial and an insightful look into complex post-traumatic stress disorder and how it differs slightly from the basic diagnosis of CPTSD. Thank you.